Good evening, I'm Ruth Cabal. You're watching a CNN Philippines special coverage on Typhoon Ompong. Pag-asa says Typhoon Ompong has maintained its strength as it moves over the West Philippine Sea. It is expected to exit the country tonight. However, this doesn't mean rains will stop. Storm alerts are still up in most of Luzon. In Metro Manila, the storm warning signal is lifted. Disaster management officials say 2 people are confirmed dead from the impact of Typhoon Ompong. Authorities still verifying if there are more casualties as responders get into calamity areas. Meanwhile, Public Works Secretary Mark Villar says all roads to Baguio City are closed. Ina Andolong tells us more.
More reports coming in from the ground. Disaster officials are now reporting 2 confirmed deaths in the aftermath of Typhoon Ompong. The Office of Civil Defense says these 2 are actually disaster responders. They're rescuers who were assisting in landslide clearing operations in the Cordillera Administrative Region. Now, the Philippine National Police reported of a 3rd casualty, a young girl presumed to be 9 to 12 years of age. Her body was found floating at the Marikina River, and they're still finding out if that death was also storm-related. They're also looking at a case of an old lady who died in Ilocos Norte, also determining if Ompong is also to blame for that. Now, officials are stressing that even if the typhoon is weakening, even if it is expected to leave the Philippine area of responsibility this evening, affected residents should still remain alert. Now they're warning of more possible storm surges, which is why those who live in coastal areas are still advised not to return to their homes yet. Small and big sea vessels are also prohibited still from sailing because of the rough seas, leaving still more than 4,800 passengers stranded in different ports across the country. There are also warnings of more landslides, especially in the mountainous area of the Cordillera region, where 42 landslides have already been recorded. And because of these landslides, Public Works and Highway Secretary Mark Villar says there's practically no access now to Baguio City. He says all major access roads to the city, namely the Negillian Road, Marcos Highway, and Cannon Road, are now all currently closed because of landslides.
We're in the process of clearing, pero hindi ko muna i-recommend na either umakyat sa Baguio o bumaba sa Baguio dahil sa gawa ng landslide. Kami naman nagde-deploy na kami, but of course, habang buwabagyo pa, syempre iniingatan din namin ang aming mga responders. As of now, sarado pa po.
Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana is saying that so far it's the landfall area of Bagao in Cagayan that's seen the most damage. He says 3 main power towers were toppled, 1,000 houses wiped out, 8 barangays there isolated with no communications. And the Defense Secretary is saying that this early he's already receiving reports of massive damage to crops. Now, for those looking for President Duterte, Special Assistant to President Bongo, as relayed by Secretary Martin Andanar earlier, says the President plans to immediately fly to affected areas to check on the situation as soon as he is given clearance by aviation authorities.
That was Ina Andolong reporting. All hands on deck for government responders as rescue operations go full blast. I spoke to Secretary Francis Tolentino, President Duterte's point person on Typhoon Ompong, and he says around 8 to 10 casualties have been reported.
Natin, mga 3 minutes. 3 minutes.
In Baguio City, Mayor Mauricio Domogan says at least 5 people are dead and 5 others are missing. He adds all access roads to the city are closed, but he hopes 2 smaller roads will be opened tomorrow. And Moving on, Ilocos Norte is among the areas battered by Typhoon Ompong. Let's check the situation in Lawag City from our senior correspondent, David Santos. David, how's the situation there right now? Has the weather improved in Lawag?
Well, Ruth, shortly after our 7 p.m. live shot, the weather has, slightly improved. No, there's still the eerie howling winds, but it also has stopped raining. Is Ilocos Norte's nightmare with Typhoon Ompong over? Well, we'd like to think that's the case, but we can't say. We let the experts determine that. But this is somehow a welcome relief from the more than 16 hours that Ompong battered Ilocos Norte today with forceful winds and heavy rains. Now, residents here initially thought Ompong's onslaught ended around noon, but we're preparing to get back to their usual routines. But at around 2 in the afternoon, Ompong resumed barreling through Ilocos Norte. This time, more rains accompanying the destructive winds. Now, as a result, basic services remained down. Power and water supply are out. Telecommunication services of Smart, Globe, and PLDT also all went down by mid-morning, but these services are being restored intermittently. Now, Ilocos Norte Governor Amy Marcos earlier today told residents living in coastlines to remain in temporary shelters at least for one more night. She said the threat of storm surges remain persistent, and it would be very risky for people to return to their homes. Now, as of noon, there is one report of fatality here in Ilocos Norte. According to Governor Marcos, an elderly woman in Paway town who died due to natural causes, but at the height of Ompong's onslaught. Now, the provincial government has yet to determine the extent of damages brought about by Typhoon Ompong. But overnight, we've been going around a number of towns in the province to check on their situations. And we've seen a fair amount of destruction, mostly among homes and business establishments where roofs were blown off by the very forceful winds. Now, we also did see some structures, mostly made of light materials, totally knocked down by the monster storm. Now, throughout the day, we also saw a lot of broken tree trunks and tree branches littered on many of the major roads. So as we speak, there's no electricity, there's no water supply, telco services are limited, and residents in evacuation centers are not being allowed to go home just yet, even if the weather has somehow improved, since the threat of storm surge in coastal communities remain persistent. Ruth.
David, you're saying that the weather has improved, but have you monitored whether some areas are still flooded?
We are trying to check the situation, particularly in Paway town. Paway, among the 23 municipalities in Ilocos Norte, is considered as a catch basin. It's supposed to be a low-lying municipality. The mayor we spoke to last night, she expressed her concern that if Ompong would wreak havoc in her municipality and it happened to be a high tide hour, that would be a problem because the rains coming from the mountains would have a difficult time getting out of the rivers and estuaries in her town, and considering if there's a high tide. So we are trying to check. We are trying to contact the mayor of Paway to check on the situation there. But so far, no other major incidents of flooding reported all over Ilocos Norte. There was some incidents of flooding in Lawag City, but eventually these floodings dissipated after several hours. Ruth.
And again, David, how many evacuees are there right now, and are there enough relief goods?
As of latest count yesterday, the figure that the provincial government, particularly its so-called resiliency office, reported that there are about 2,600 families from all over Ilocos Norte seeking shelter, mostly in public schools that have been converted into evacuation centers. Quite a number of them are living in coastal communities. Others are living near riverbanks as well as in near mountains, where there is a threat of landslides. the lady Governor Amy Marcos, has assured today. She instructed her disaster officials to ensure that sufficient food and potable water supply are distributed in these evacuation centers, especially after some of them actually spoke to us complaining that they are not getting enough, Ruth.
David Santos reporting. More updates on Typhoon Ompong after the break.